So much is always happening here in Canada with regards to immigration and the changes and what they can do, what they cannot do, the challenges, the hurdles, sometimes also a lot of backlash. But the most recent, what has happened in this week, is the new immigration targets, the strategic, excuse me, the strategic plan going forward. Quebec announcing its immigration targets and plans. And then another report that has come from Conference Board of Canada and ICC, which is the International Institute of Canadian Citizenship, stating that immigrants are leaving Canada at an alarming pace. All of this is what we're going to talk about today in this weekly roundup. My name is Kubeir. I'm a CICC licensed immigration consultant. I love Canadian immigration as a subject. Therefore, that's why I do it. And of course, at the end of this whole session, we will take as many questions as we can. I have a little bit more time at hand, so I will try and do as many questions as I can and get them sorted for you. Starting with this presentation today, quote of the week: the only limit to our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today. Franklin Roosevelt, so profound, right? The only way we limit ourselves is by creating and casting doubts as to what we can and cannot do, what we will be able to do, what we will not be able to achieve. And we ourselves create those obstacles. We ourselves are those hurdles. The one way of sort of going ahead, and there are so many people who will say it, right? Nike's the tag, just do it, and things like just get it done. Thinking that you will get something done, preparing to get something done, planning to get something done is not actually doing it. Getting it done is when you actually get it done. But when we try to cast doubts, we try to sort of put more obstacles in our own head. They're not obstacles out there, but once you actually start getting it done, you get it done. And therefore, the only limit to your realization of tomorrow will be the doubts that you have of today. So once you get that sorted out, I think you should be up and about and on your way. This is the Canadian Immigration Weekly Roundup. Stay up to date with all our platforms. We're everywhere. Starting with the PNP draws, Ontario conducted a master's PhD stream draw. The province invited 1,051 master's graduate stream candidates with a minimum score of only 43. And for PhD stream, they invited 66 candidates with a score of 42. Now, 1,051 is a big number. That also tells you that there are a lot of these candidates who are chosen to come to Canada. They completed their masters in Ontario within the last 2 years, and they found that with the masters giving them 30 additional points and they're being eligible to get their work permit, that by itself is not sufficient. So they have chosen to go the master's graduate stream route, which obviously costs a little bit more money because you have to pay the provincial nominee application fee to Ontario. But 1,051 people have chosen to wait for 2 years, which is the processing time for the non-express entry route applications, and go that way to get their permanent residence. With each day, with each passing month, with each passing week, the whole process of the permanent residence is getting a bit more challenging. It's getting a bit more difficult. It's definitely getting more stressful. And therefore, congratulations to this 1,051 candidates. Makes a lot of sense for having chosen this stream. And this is also for people who are still planning as to what they should study when they come to Canada. If master's is something which you want to study in Canada, Ahlan wa sahlan, by all means do that. Couple of options to look at. Always have a pathway clear before you have even started looking for which university or college or which program you want to study. If you're coming to Canada only to study, well, then absolutely choose as per your background, as per your interest, and as per your aspirations. All right. I'm not sure how many of them are there, but that's how you would go about doing it. But if you're coming to Canada to study so that you can get a pathway to permanent residence, then you should be absolutely sure about this pathway even before you start. After you complete the study, what are you planning to do? Would you have options then? Which province you are studying? Which field of education you are getting into? In the province that you are choosing to study, are there any other criteria, conditions, requirements that you have to get a job in that specific field that you have studied? For example, Alberta. Are there any easier programs that allow you to apply for provincial nominee programs after having studied in that province, if in case you do not have enough points. Which province will have more employment opportunities, and therefore the PNP programs applicable to you if you are studying in that province. All these things that you have to consider. Just do not blindly go to an education agent and he or she says, hey, I have this college ABC, they have this great program, the fee is very cheap, I will get you the admission letter in 24 hours and off you go. That's absolutely the wrong, absolutely the most ridiculous way of choosing a program. Ontario, if you choose to study in Ontario, they have the International Student Job Offer Stream, whereby you completed a 2-year program in Ontario, or a 1-year program which requires at the very minimal a bachelor's degree to get into that program. If you've completed these programs within the last 2 years and you don't have any work experience, that's fine. As long as you can get a job offer, and the job offer is in a priority occupation which they're inviting, then you have an option to apply for PNP. But job offer is a condition and a requirement, and most of you know that getting a job offer is so difficult. So therefore, Ontario's master's stream gives you that option. You don't need a job offer, you don't need any work experience. Of course, all of those add a little bit more points here and there. But the main criteria is that you should have completed your master's degree from one of the universities that have been listed or designated by Ontario. You complete your master's and you are eligible to make your expression of interest, get your points, submit your application, submit your profile, you get invited, you submit your application. So great option. Second good option for masters, for people who are interested in masters and don't want to struggle for nominations, don't want to struggle for PR applications, is British Columbia. Now, British Columbia has a list of 7 different fields of studies that you can enroll in through their designated colleges, universities. Again, you'll have to go to the British Columbia website under their international postgraduate stream. Check which programs, which colleges are eligible. You can enroll in any one of them depending on your background. And once you complete your education with them, again, through British Columbia International Postgraduate Stream, you would be able to apply without having any job offer. Third, very, very good province to choose, whether you're doing a 1-year program, 2-year program, masters, is New Brunswick. New Brunswick has a student connection stream, whereby if you have an express entry profile, of course, that is a requirement because it's under the express entry stream. The other two, the international postgraduate from BC and masters in Ontario, is not linked to express entry, but the New Brunswick program is, which basically means you need to have at least 1 year of work experience. In this one, even if you've done 1-year program, 2-year program, masters, whatever, in New Brunswick, once you complete your studies, you would be eligible to create your expression of interest. Get an ITA very quickly, and once you get your ITA, then you can apply for nomination. Very simple, very straightforward, nothing complicated, actually quite fast as well with New Brunswick. So always be very prudent in what you're choosing, how you're choosing. Don't be in a rush. Absolutely don't fall into the trap of these education agents whose only agenda is try to promote the colleges that they want to promote. If you haven't done your research, then you only have yourself to blame. Let's get back to our presentation here. British Columbia on October 31 invited more than 203 provincial nominee program candidates, and 4 separate draws were held. The largest considered skilled workers with a minimum score of 111. That was the biggest draw, biggest segment of draw that they had. The international graduates with a score of 113, the entry level and semi-skilled candidates who had a minimum score of 91. The remaining 3 draws were occupation specific and targeted only skilled workers and international graduates. The candidates needed a minimum score of 60. 48 were early childhood educators, 22 were healthcare professions, and other than that, less than 5 other priority occupations were also given invitations. Overall, with British Columbia, the only stream where you don't need a job offer is the international postgraduate stream, the one I spoke to you about, the masters and PhDs as well. But for everybody else, for every other stream in British Columbia, you need to have a job offer. Alberta, which has always been a favorite, and a lot of people are keeping high hopes with this particular province for a nomination or an invitation. Well, they did publish the draw result for 24th and the 26th of October. On 24th, they have invited only 22 candidates through the dedicated healthcare pathway with the Alberta job offer stream. Again, employer driven. On 26th October, they invited 100 candidates who had a family connection. Now, by family connection, we're talking about siblings or parents in Alberta. And of course, in addition to that, their primary knock code, the primary occupation, was also considered as in demand or a priority occupation. The minimum score was only 369. Now, if you were to ask me what was the priority occupation, I don't know, because nobody knows. Alberta does not announce or publish the knock codes which have been identified or selected in these draws. Manitoba, on the 2nd of November, they have invited 400 candidates to apply for the PNP. The province held 3 separate draws. The first one was for 204 skilled worker in Manitoba stream with a very high score of 768. This was a general draw. The second one was for the skilled worker overseas. The province invited only 65 candidates, but the score was slightly lower at 708, which again, in contrast, is still pretty high. But this was a part of a strategic recruitment initiative whereby the provincial authorities are now going out and are identifying specific candidates under the specific strategic recruitment initiative. The final draw invited 131 candidates from the international education stream, whereby you would have completed your education in Manitoba. And again, this is another province which offers you a great opportunity to apply after you have completed your education in the province. Prince Edward Islands on the 2nd of November invited 41 labor and express entry candidates to apply. The candidates were selected if they were working in healthcare, manufacturing, food processing, and agriculture sectors. In the past 12 months, they have invited 2,385 candidates to apply for the PNP. Arima in Quebec. On 26th of October, the 2 most recent provincial immigration draws took place. They invited 1,220 candidates. The first draw targeted multiple trade occupations with a score of 465 points or more. The second draw targeted candidates in tech, healthcare, and other priority occupations, and the scores were greater than 608. In both draws, the candidates required the level 7 of your French language scores, and that continues to be a very big requirement for a lot of programs. Now, let's talk about the Quebec immigration levels plan. Now, on the 1st of November, IRCC, or rather Mark Miller, Immigration Minister of Canada, announced the immigration quotas and plans for 2024, 2025, 2026. Because Quebec has its own immigration programs, and under the Canada-Quebec Accord, they are free to set their own immigration targets, quotas. So therefore, on 1st of November, Quebec also announced their targets as well. And they have announced only for 2 years versus federal, which is announced for 3 years, which is a multi-level plan. Earlier, Quebec used to announce for 4 years, but this year they have said we will announce only for 2 years. And this is going to be a wait and watch policy whereby they have to see how volatile the market is, how things are progressing, and therefore then give themselves the option to not at this point of time have any targets indicated for 2026. So for 2024 and 2025, the numbers have been set to 50,000 for each year. Out of 50,000, they will be about 31,000 under the economic programs. Then they will have the families, and then they will have refugees, and then there are a few hundreds for some other categories as well. So those are the main 4 categories for them, and that's where they are inviting most of the candidates. Now, people who are also interested in the Quebec business immigration, you should know that Quebec business immigration will, or rather should, start early next year, which is, I think, in January itself. So if you're looking to do that, you need a few $1 million in hand in terms of net worth and in terms of the money that you would be looking to put in. But that is also another program, a very long one, but a program where a lot of people who may not be otherwise able to score would be able to get through. Now, another change that Quebec has introduced is that they want some of their temporary workers to complete a French language exam if those temporary workers want to renew or extend their work permits for another 3 years. Now, in this case, the workers have to demonstrate that they can converse at least at a basic level in French. there will be no written component, but they will have to undergo a French language test. This is only for temporary foreign workers who are coming under the PTET program. So these are mainly the closed work permits. They are not your open work permits. So the postgraduate work permit holders don't have to worry about it. They're not the ones who are being targeted. But certain categories of the closed work permit holders, they would be asked to undergo a French test in order to get their work permits extended. So French, again, playing a huge role here. In other news, well, the biggest news for the week was the immigration levels plan that have been announced for 2024, 2025, 2026. Let's take a very quick listen.
Immigration is now driving most of our population growth and labor force stability. I'm pleased to share that Canada intends to maintain its target of welcoming 485,000 new permanent residents in 2024 and 500,000 in 2025. Starting in 2026, the number of newcomers we aim to welcome will stabilize at 500,000.
Well, what he is indicating is that for the next 3 years, we already now have our targets. For 2024, which is the next year, which is about in less than 2 months now, the immigration quotas for this year will be 485,000. Let's also take a look at this. Right, so these are the new immigration levels planned for 2024, 2025, 2026. 485,000 is the target for 2024. No change in that number. That number has remained the same from what was announced last year. Usually we expect some number to be increased, but no change this year. For 2025 also, the numbers have remained the same, 500,000. What is more important is for 2026, the numbers have stabilized. Means, for example, from 2024 to 2025, you have an increase of 15,000 in the target number. But between 25 to 26, there is no increase, indicating that they are now stabilizing the numbers. Over the recent few weeks, months building up, there has been a lot of negative sentiment towards the increasing immigration in Canada. Housing crisis, inflation, cost of living. A lot of these things have created that sentiment where people are seeing that, of course, unemployment as well, that immigrants or the rapid increase in the number of immigrants may not be favorable for Canada at this point of time. So I guess Canada has just tried to, or rather, IRCC or Immigration Minister has just tried to play it into the into that sentiment. They didn't want to make any big announcements. They didn't want to sort of say anything which would be considered as would be considered negative to what the people are thinking. So that's what they wanted to do. But with these numbers, again, we already knew these numbers from last year, right? The only difference that they have is that they have identified the number of people that they would be looking to bring in under the French-speaking candidates outside Quebec. Now, this is not a number that has been added to the quotas. This number is already included as part of the quotas. This will be at the rate of 6%. As in terms of the number that they want to target. Then you have 7% for 2025 and then 8% for 2026. This is the only number that has been increasing year on year. Other than that, the express entry quotas is now 110,770, which actually has increased by 1,000 from last year. So another 1,000 added, which is always a good news. Any number that goes up for express entry is always a good news. But then there is also the situation about the category-based draws, regular draws. The number of invitations will be split, of course, right? Mind you, this number, 110,770, is not ITAs. These are the number of people. Huge difference. Agents, a lot of people out there, they will always try to tell you this is the quota for ITAs. This is not the quota for ITAs. This is the quota for the number of people. One ITA could equate to multiple people. For example, a couple. For example, a family with child. That would basically means one successful ITA would mean that many number of people against which this quota is established. So in express entry, you would also have portion of these numbers, which is under the provincial nominee programs that are linked to express entry. Provincial nominee program total quota is 110,000. It is distributed for each of the provinces. For example, Ontario has about 16,500 as their immigration quota out of this 110,000. But this 16,500 includes all categories, includes human capital priorities, includes job offer streams, international student stream, master's PhD stream, entrepreneur stream. All of these streams together is what forms 16,500. So when you see this 110,000, it also includes all different streams, express entry and non-express entry. If you take a rough segmentation, it's about 45% is there for express entry. So out of these 110,000, you are looking at roughly, I would say 50,000 people, which would get added to 110,000 over here. So that would be about 161,000 approximately is what you're looking at. The number of people who will be invited through express entry. People, not ITAs, people. So 161,000 people being invited in express entry is basically giving you a total number of an ITA of roughly about 90,000 ITAs for next year. That's the number you have, 90 to 100. I mean, of course, they could stretch it a bit here and there, depending on, they can always have those crazy, big, large invitations, but you're looking at roughly 90,000 ITAs. Now, how do we calculate 90,000 ITAs? Well, you calculate 90,000 ITAs based on the fact that there is roughly 30 to 33% rejection ratios, decline ratio. So people who get an ITA, but they decline, they don't proceed with an ITA, and they go back to the pool, they get an ITA again, they decline, right? Those kind of people. So decline numbers, and then people who make a application but do not provide correct documentation. They do not provide the marriage certificate correctly, they do not provide the passport copy correctly, they do not provide the correct police clearance. Their applications gets rejected in the R10 stage. So those ITAs are all wasted, and therefore there is about a 30 to 33% number that you calculate in terms of the ITAs that are wasted. Those people come back into the pool, or the ITAs basically go back to somebody else who can use them. So the number of ITAs calculated is basically on an average taken into consideration that one successful ITA would equate to roughly 2.23 people. And this, as I said, taken into consideration that there are ITAs which could be for a single applicant because the person is not married or divorced or widowed, or God forbid, whatever that might be. Or, of course, there is also people where they have families, they are married, they are in a common law relationship, they're partners, or they have children. So taking all of that into average based on the data from the open source data on IRCC's website, from data from 2019, 2020, and 2021, you come to a number of 2.23 as an average successful ITA equal to the number of people. And therefore, the number that you're coming to is roughly 90,000 ITAs that can be issued in the year 2024. Now, when the ITAs are issued at the range of 2024, what then happens is they are now going to be segmented between category-based draws and the regular express entry draws. And of course, you have the PNP draws. The PNPs obviously have the highest advantage because IRCC is under obligation with provinces to give them the ITAs, because that's the agreement, right, between the provinces and IRCC. The provinces gives the nomination, and then IRCC has to give them the ITA. Otherwise, what's the point of the nomination, right? That's why they get the 600 point. So PNPs will always have the highest preference advantage. Even if there are no draws, PNP draws will continue. After that, then you have your regular express entry draws. So what we have seen in the last 6 months, the way IRCC has been conducting its draws is that when they conduct a PNP draw, or when they want to conduct a PNP draw, they conduct a regular draw instead, and they give you the number of invitations equal to the number of people who have a PNP nomination with 600 points, plus a few hundred or thousand more. Therefore, making it a regular express entry draw, but primarily directed towards the PNP. However, the last draw which happened from express entry was not even a regular draw. It was just a PNP specific draw, whereby giving invitations only the PNP candidates. Could be because for this year, we are now approaching towards the end of the year. The number of invitations issued for this year has far actually increased, or rather has gone beyond what at least I thought in terms of the anticipated numbers based on the quotas for 2023 and 2024. Because mind you, all the invitations that are being issued now or have been issued after, I think, August onwards, August, September, October, November, December, all these invitations that are being issued are actually towards the quotas for 2024, because all these people who have been given ITAs, most of them, their applications are being processed towards the end of the year. And then by the time they are finalized and they become permanent residents of Canada, that will be 2024. And therefore, these candidates come under the targets or quotas for 2024. Simple mathematics. But what everybody out there needs to understand is with all these invitations, ITAs that will be issued by IRCC, now there is this segmentation between category-based draws and the regular express entry draws. Now that the categories have been identified, right, and you already know those categories, for this year itself, also they have indicated that they will actually be looking to include these categories. Not, they haven't said it directly, but that's where they said it. But let me show you that. They have said that immigrants have an important role to play, blah, 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 blah. Canada has skills needed, da, 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 da. And then so that the labor force gaps in critical sectors, health, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, trades, transportation, and agriculture are not a barrier to the success of expansion of Canadian businesses. That's where you have it. They have already identified the categories without saying that these will be the categories that would be taken as part of their that's where they will be paying more attention on. So something which all of us needs to bear in mind, that there is a very high possibility that these categories will continue the way they are, at least for probably the early part of next year. Now, of course, there is an expectation that there will be a tabled report from the Parliament in February next year, whereby IRCC will have to disclose how they have identified these categories and what is the update or what are the benefits, advantages, numbers, statistics, data in relation to these categories, and how are they fulfilling the requirements of Canadian society at large. Having said that, the number of, as I was talking to you about the number of ITAs, with the segmentation now very clear between category-based draws and the regular express entry draws, you will now expect, and this is going to be hard, that the number of regular express entry draws would be less, category-based express entry draws will be more. The allocation of ITAs between the two would obviously be quite apparent. There would be more invitations coming to the categories, less invitations coming to the regular express entry draws. And in the regular express entry draws, please bear in mind, there will always be the PNPs, right? So the actual people who do not have a nomination and who will continue to receive an ITAs, they will remain in a very high CRS score level. Now, having said that, and I know there are a lot of people who are struggling in the 480s, 490s, because at the end of the day, 480, 490 is a brilliant score. No, anybody who's outside Canada getting to 481 by itself means you need a CLB 10, right? Otherwise, it's not happening unless you have a sibling or you have a PhD. So by itself, that score is pretty awesome. But the way the dynamics are playing, the way the market demand and supply is playing, it's no longer in their favor. And therefore, a lot of people resorting to LMIAs or job offers, or coming to Canada as an international student, or coming to Canada and then getting a work permit. And of course, resorting to French. So my expectation for next year, until and unless IRCC conducts the large draws that they did in April this year, whereby they held back-to-back express entry draws, they invited 7,000, 7,000, 7,000 in 3 draws, total of 21,000 invitations in a span of 2 weeks, 14 days, and the score plummeted down to 481. So it was an intentional move. It was a deliberate move to bring the scores down, because there was this huge number of people that were collecting. Now, if IRCC chooses to do that, and I would not put it beyond them, then you can see some encouraging scores, or again, scores coming back to 465. If IRCC does not do that, now mind you, when IRCC chose to do that this year in April, there were no category-based draws. There were only regular express entry draws. There was one isolated FSW-specific draw, which to date I have never understood the reason for. I think it was more of a mistake than an actual process or thought behind it. But apart from that, haven't seen anything else, and I don't expect anything else either. Do I expect CEC specific draws? I don't expect it. I know a lot of you are anticipating it. I wouldn't, again, I can never say that it can never happen. They say, right, never say never. I don't anticipate it. And the reason for that is all program draws include CECs. All the category-based draws include CECs. So if you are a Canadian experience class, and if you have the experience in the right areas, then you would get through anyways, right? It's people who are expecting general draws. It's people who are expecting that because they will do CEC specific draws, the scores can go down to 430s, 420s, maybe 300s. Well, for you guys, this is going to sound really harsh, but At least I don't expect it. And even if they were to conduct an isolated here and there 2 CEC specific draws, the scores are not going to come down. Or rather, they will not be drastically a very low score, if that is what you were anticipating. So that's basically how the ITAs and the game plan for express entry is looking like. Certainly expect 490s at some point of time, because now with the new year, as we will move into it, the ITA quotas will get refreshed, and when the ITA's quota get refreshed, then obviously they will be looking to invite, or rather at least they have a bigger pool to play with. Right now we are coming to the end of the year, so they have a smaller pool of invitations to play with. That could be one of the reasons why they did a PNP specific draw and not a regular draw, because now as we go closer to the last month of the year, they would have lesser number of ITAs to draw out. In my expectation, we're looking at 4 draw weeks. This week expecting a draw, and then 2 weeks later, and then 2 draws or 2 draw weeks in December. Now we're no longer saying draws, we are saying draw weeks, because in each week you could have multiple draws, categories and PNPs, etc. So therefore 4 draw weeks, this week itself, expecting one as well. This is how the PR immigration quotas or targets are looking like at this point of time. As I said, nothing drastically different here, except for the fact, quite surprisingly, Atlantic Immigration Program quotas have been reduced. Federal business remains the same. Federal economic policies, as people thought, TR to PR, 3,000 are the number of people who are still going to be finalized. At some point of time, they will be finalized. This is not a target for new program. It is just a target for the numbers that they still need to finalize. So TR to PRs, that will be finalized there. Apart from that, nothing much else happening here. Parents and grandparents for this year, it's a good news, 32,000. That's a bigger number than last year. And these people are hoping that this year, when it happens, when I'm saying this year, I mean 2024, that they will create a new pool, and hopefully new people can enter the pool and invite their parents for permanent residence. Spouses and partners, it's around 82,000. So that also looks consistent, nothing much there. For protected persons and refugees, the numbers have remained the same, no additions there at 76,000, and humanitarian about 13,000. So that brings up the total permanent residence programs and quotas as announced by IRCC. Coming back to immigration levels plan, that is covered now. The main subject for today, and this is something which is very, very interesting. Now, obviously, we always talk about numbers which are coming to Canada. Very rarely do we talk about the numbers of people who might not be wanting to come to Canada, who might not want to stay in Canada. So what happened is that very recently, I mean, this has actually been part of a conversation, part of discussion for quite some time, that more and more people are leaving Canada. Now, when I'm saying more people are leaving Canada, it is not in hundreds and thousands, mind you, as some people would want you to believe. At this point of time, the number of people wanting to come to Canada or who are coming to Canada is much higher than the number of people who are leaving Canada. But between the year-on-year data, right? For example, in the year 2000, 2002, the number of people who would leave Canada after becoming permanent residents, then the data point at 2010, then the data point in 2016, then the data point in 2018, and now 2020, those data points are indicating an increase, year-on-year increase in the number of immigrants who leave Canada. Obviously, for Canada, that's a huge concern, right? The whole point of this immigration programs is that people should come to Canada and they should make Canada their home. They wouldn't want to leave Canada, because that is how they will continue to contribute to the Canadian economy, Canadian tax bucket, the job market, the society at large. So what is the reason that people are leaving? 2 institutions, Institute of Canadian Citizenship and Conference Board of Canada. These are the 2 institutions which have published a report which indicates that this number is now actually a huge concern. Because after all the efforts that the government makes in inviting candidates, in conducting all these programs for immigration, and obviously, having people to live and work in Canada, if people actually then choose to leave Canada, it's again a negative factor, right? It doesn't really help. overall in the big scheme of things. Now, that is besides the point that every time somebody wants to leave, there's a long queue of people who want to come to Canada. But then that does not, that still defeats the purpose. So they've realized that between year 4 and year 8, so after becoming a permanent resident in Canada, after 4 years to between the period of from 4 to 8 years, that is when majority of them chose to left. The last number said that about 65,000 people left in 1 year. Now, it does not sound like a very big number, but it is a very big number. The percentage is increasing. So there, let's just see if I can show you this. Here. Okay, people are saying it's on mute. Not really sure why that would happen. Just give me a moment till I sort that out. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, tell me if you can hear
Finds that a growing number of immigrants to Canada are choosing to leave rather than stay. To join us to talk more about this is Daniel Bernhard, CEO of the Institute for Canadian Citizenship. Daniel, thanks so much for speaking with us this morning.
Good morning.
So tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing in terms of numbers.
Can you guys hear the sound yet, or is it still no sound? Can you just somebody comment and let me know if you can hear the sound now?
With immigrants choosing to leave.
So this report, I think, gave us some very important insights before we even wrote it. The first important finding is that no one had really bothered to look at how many immigrants were leaving the country. We talk so much about how many are coming, but very little about how many stay. So I think that's a very important finding to begin with. But the actual report itself found 3 things. First, so-called onward migration, that's immigrants who come and then leave, has been creeping up silently for decades, and it's gone pretty unnoticed. Second, in the most recent years that we have data for, 2017, 18, 19, the rate of onward migration skyrocketed. We're talking about spikes of 30 to 40% above the normal historical average of what you might expect. The third finding is one that gives me hope personally, is that the early years are really important. There's a really high risk that people will leave between years 4 and 8 after they get their permanent residency. If we can make Canada enjoyable and have positive experiences, both economically and socially, for immigrants in that period, the chances that they'll stay are much, much higher. So the ingredients are there, but we need to be paying attention to this. Retention is kind of gone unnoticed, and that needs to change.
And do we know why?
Okay, so obviously, I do not want to bore you guys with the whole video recording there. The link, I'm going to post the link in the description. You can watch it. It's not a very long one. It's about 4 minutes. But when this person asked, do you know why? The person did not really have a concrete data-related answer. It's more that, you know what, let's just see this one.
What are the reasons that immigrants are choosing to leave?
So the data in this report don't say why, but I can.
So the data doesn't say why, right? But we know a lot of these whys, and as part of as part of how many people are reporting about this, I just want to very quickly show you this so that you have this as well. So what I did was I just opened few of these tabs or websites so you can take a look at how many people are reporting. So just go on to any website. There is this, this was not. All the websites are referring to the same report, record spike in number of immigrants leaving Canada. Then you also have it on, yep, another one here. Higher number of immigrants choose to leave Canada. Bloomberg report here on as well. Immigrants are leaving Canada at a faster pace. This was another one, which is also a video, again a long one, which you just not a very long one, 3.5 minutes. Record number of immigrants are leaving Canada, and so on and so forth. So what do you think? Why do you think this is happening? Do you want any one of you, please, by all means, do share your comments, and of course I'm going to talk to you about it in a bit. In the description of in the description of today's video, you can also see the actual report which was presented by Conference Board of Canada. It's called the Leaky Bucket, a study of immigrant retention trends in Canada. You can obviously download this. That was the link, and this is actually the report which was shared. It indicates obviously the keyword, the key findings and the recommendation. There is a policy. There is explaining what exactly is happening, and obviously the data points with regards to this leakage, if you want to call it that at all. But in most cases, or rather, and what has been identified already, the transition of actually leaving Canada and going or migrating to a different country, and a lot of people would basically already know that US has been another country where a lot of people want to live. US is a country where a lot of people want to immigrate to, but with their immigration programs and the restrictions, or I wouldn't say restriction, but the lengthy green card processing, it's almost difficult for most people to get through there. So Canada offers a kind of a springboard. So you come to Canada, become a citizen, and then the chances for you to get to the US, live, work there, get your visa sorted out over there is so much far easier. And therefore, a lot of people tend to, springboard into the US. But not only that, there are a lot of countries in Europe where a lot of people then choose to go to. Let's leave. Some of you are talking about it. Higher rent, low affordability of buying houses, lower income, higher tax systems are all the reasons. Great points there. Foreign experience and education not recognized in Canada, inflation, housing crisis, and at times not willing to relocate to another province. Again, another one saying high cost of living, poor healthcare, housing crisis are huge issues. Housing not affordable, unfavorable healthcare, lack of job availability, same. So I mean, even from the people who are watching this today, even you are talking about the same factors that a lot of Canadian people are talking about, and they're also referring to the same factors of housing being a huge issue. Housing crisis has now become probably elections will be lost because of that aspect, and therefore that was one of the reasons why you did not see any increase in the immigration quotas for the next year, because this is going to be a huge issue. Now, higher taxes, I won't say that to be an issue, because when you're choosing to come to Canada, you already know what the tax rate is. The issues happen is when you do not have employment opportunities within the same field as your background, as your work experience, as your skills. That is absolutely a huge demotivating factor. For example, there is a huge push right now for construction, for healthcare, right? Now, these two factors, construction, healthcare, trade, you are inviting people to Canada, but your process that you offer in order for them to then actually practice those occupations, that is extremely cumbersome. Now, each of those occupations are regulated by different organizations, and those organizations have their own criteria and requirements. For some of them, they can take years in order to get the certifications that are required to practice their occupation. For example, doctors. Canada needs doctors. Canada is inviting doctors. You can see the OINP draws. You can see the IRCC's healthcare draws. They are inviting doctors. Doctors are coming to Canada. But can they practice? No, they can't. They have to first get the certification and the licensing in order, which takes a lot of time. And therefore, you will have some doctors who will be driving Ubers. Now, not that driving an Uber is a problem. It's the fact of what you have trained for, what you have worked for, what you have gained work experience, your education, you not being able to practice that. That is a huge demotivating factor. And that has been highlighted and identified as one of the key reasons why people get demotivated. They then change rather than leave back. Or go back to their own country or whatever. Another reason that people have found to be very difficult. Now, I won't talk about weather because, hey, I mean, we can. You're talking about Canada. You're not talking about a tropical paradise or a beach by the sea or something, right? You're talking about Canada. The minute you choose Canada, you know where Canada is, right? On the global map, you know it's right up there in the north, very close to the North Pole, right? So what were you expecting? If you did not even know that the 90% of the land mass of the country is uninhabitable, you can't even live there because of the hard annual, or rather the cover of snow throughout the year. But then that is the reason why most of the cities are in the southern part of the country, right across the Canadian US border. Most of the majority of the population lives across the border, right? So weather can never be rather should never be taken as the factor. Of course, in some parts of Canada, people don't want to live there because of the weather or the extreme weather. But weather in Toronto, British Columbia, Montreal, Calgary, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, in some of these places can become harsh, can become quite extreme, but on most of the times it is fine. So when you're choosing to come to Canada, you should have already known about the weather, right? But again, a lot of people after a point of time cannot handle it. Even if they knew about it, they can't handle it. The gloomy days, the days when there is no sunlight, when it has been snowing for a few days, or when it's been really cold for a few days, you haven't been able to go out, your mental health takes a dip, right? Your social life takes a huge dip. You're not able to interact with people, you can't go out and meet people, and that obviously then over a period of time builds up and puts you in a state where you don't want to be here. Other than that, when we talk about high taxes, well, that's a debatable one, right? Because of your taxes, things are paid for, whether it's the development of the country, whether it is paying for children's education, free healthcare, free education, subsidized college education, retirement benefits, etc., etc. So, there's no point of discussing or debating about taxes. Again, that is something which you already know. What else can we talk about now? Healthcare. Now, healthcare, when we say it's poor healthcare, the quality of the healthcare versus the resources, those are two again different things. Now, my personal experience and my family's experience with healthcare has been brilliant. There was a specific extreme life-threatening situation of a very young child in our family. And the child is absolutely enjoying life and running around and rocking and kicking only because of the healthcare, or only because of how quickly the healthcare system kicked in and took care of the child without obviously having to pay a penny for it. That is the reason why the child is alive. But under the routine health issues, under the routine health situations, would you say the same? No, you won't. If you go to the emergency room, you can expect to wait there for 6-7 hours until somebody takes a look at you. You could be there with a broken hand, and all they could be giving you is Tylenol just to manage your pain till somebody can take a look at you, because that triage, right? The system, the healthcare system, it has been overburdened. There is a huge lack of resources. The government knows it, but again, not sure how much they're trying to do to tackle this. So again, as I said, elections are going to be won and lost because of these issues, because these are the areas which are directly impacting people. Even today, a lot of people choose to return back to, whether it's India or they even go to the Middle East, and in some cases Thailand, to get certain health conditions taken care of, because wait time in Canada is just too long. Sometimes it could be 2 years before you could be taken care of. So the quality of the healthcare, no doubt, is good. It's really very good. It's the resources which is creating a huge issue. So that is another issue. Now, of course, this is how it is, right? Anybody who leaves their own home country, for example, you're coming from India, you're coming from Pakistan, you're coming from Jamaica, you're coming from any part of the Africa, until and unless you are coming from a background which is extremely I don't know what's the right word, in a situation, could be, God forbid, war, a destitute situation, civil unrest, really lack of economic resources, Now, if you're coming from that kind of a background and you come to Canada, of course, you don't want to leave Canada anytime soon. But if you're coming from a country, or if you're coming from a background which is economically stable, which is already offering you a lot of employment opportunities, which is already offering you a lot of growth opportunities, which is already offering you a lot of flexibility, a lot of comfort in terms of day-to-day living and convenience, then when you come to Canada, you actually find that you have gone back into your economic cycle of life. And therefore, a lot of those people struggle to manage from one day to another and over a period of time, and they could probably be the first ones to sort of return back. Some of them would return back as soon as within the first year of coming to Canada, and some of them would probably first wait to get their citizenship and then return back. Hey, because you've come to Canada, may as well get your citizenship, get your passport, and then go back to doing whatever you were doing in life. Different people do it for different reasons, but yes, you say, right, roti kapda makan, food, your well-being and your housing, your employment opportunities, those are the main factors for any person to choose any place. I mean, within a country also there is domestic migration, right? People will move from one part of the country to another, or a more popular or more urban center because of the opportunities. Same thing works around in the world. But yes, in the given circumstances, Canada is certainly leaking immigrants, and it is not able to retain immigrants at a certain level, and that is a huge issue. I'm not sure how the governments are looking to, how is the government looking to tackle that, what they will be doing as we move forward. But in the near future, this is going to be a debatable and a talking point, and something which would be brought up time and again. That's basically all that I have for you for today's presentation and discussions. Do connect with us on the social media platforms. We are there almost everywhere: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, or X if you want to call it, Threads. And of course, if you're here, then boop on the like button so the video goes out. As they say, like, share, subscribe, and subscribe if you have Canada on your mind. Questions, right? And there are tons and tons of them. Let's take those. Start with the super chats. Neil says, my wife is a primary applicant, and I got an ITA, IQR. I don't know what that means. We supposed to get, guys, please write complete words, because sometimes you are using acronyms and you're expecting me to understand that. I don't, in most cases. Hey, I'm an old age relic here. So I don't know. We're saying we're supposed to get ITR from all the banks that have accent in, or banks that have I have no clue what you're trying to say, but let me just, if you're talking about proof of funds, that's what I'm understanding, because you're talking about the banks. So do you need to get letters from all the accounts? No, you don't need to get letters from only those accounts in which you have proof of funds. And if you are holding the proof of funds with your spouse, then the money can be in both your accounts, the money can be in your account, the money can be only in your spouse's accompanying spouse's account. That is not a problem. If you're using the funds from your spouse's account to show your proof of funds, then please make sure that the spouse gives you a consent letter, which does not need to be notarized. The consent letter will state that the spouse does not have any objection in you using the funds for settlement in Canada, and this is the account details, and that the spouse has the access to the funds. That's what you're looking to do. Does IRCC check LinkedIn for background? Yes, in a lot of cases, IRCC does check LinkedIn accounts for background and for work histories. Yes, they do. I mean, IRCC does mention those. The IRCC does check the social media accounts for your background for sure. On implied status, will you get a work permit by the date on the letter? Can you continue working if the date passes and no decision made? Okay, so you're referring to the letter that IRCC issues automatically after you have applied for postgraduate work permit extension, or any work permit extension for that matter. Now, that letter that is being provided to you, was the intention or the plan to give you that letter was that using that letter, you would be able to show it to your employer, who would then allow you to work. So the date that is mentioned on that letter is 4 months from the date that letter is issued, usually. And the reason why it was 4 months is because at that point of time, when this whole scheme or this plan was processed, the average processing time was roughly 3 months for the work permit applications. So they gave it a 4 month because it covers the average processing time. But by no means do you have to stop working by the date mentioned on that work permit extension letter. You can absolutely continue working. You are covered by the Canadian immigration law under the IRPA, which states that as long as you applied for an extension or for a new work permit or for a work permit while your current status was valid, then you are in a maintained status or implied status. The conditions of your current valid permit, that is what will continue as it is, and you can work under the conditions of your current work permit. So that is what it stays until the decision has been made on your application that you have made. So you don't have to stop working as per the date mentioned on that letter. If it is really worrying you, then 1 month before the expiry of the date indicated, you can raise a web form, you can write to IRCC, you can request them to send you another letter so that you can provide it to your employer. You can do that. IRCC sends you another letter. That is not an issue. But as per the law is concerned, you can absolutely continue working. There is absolutely no issues there at all. Rishabh says, I applied for TRV in Canada. It is not yet processed. Can I renew my expiring passport and use the passport for TRV stamp instead of my older one? Yes, you can. There is no problem. You can apply for an extension of your passport. When you do receive your new passport and once your TRV is approved, you can send both your old and the new passport together for the stamping. And hopefully they will give you the validity as per your new passport. So that should not be an issue at all. Okay, for the people who are asking me for predictions on certain types of draws, I don't know. There is no way for me to predict. We can always speculate about certain things, but it doesn't really help because you're asking for specific scores, specific knock codes, specific categories. There is absolutely no way to predict what draws will happen. As far as STEM category is concerned, now I understand the STEM category where that one is a bit of an issue because only one draw was held for STEM categories, that also for only 500 people. They got the real short end of the stick. Surprisingly, STEM category had the lowest number of invitations. All other categories had a higher number given out, right? But only STEM was only 500. So I certainly anticipate a draw for STEM category. Now, it is quite possible that the reason they are holding back on the STEM category draws is primarily to balance it out with the current industry sentiment or the way the market is. I wouldn't say there is a recession in the market, but there is certainly a downturn in the market, especially in the IT industry. A lot of companies did lay off employees, they did lay off staff. Now, is that related? It is a possibility. I don't know. There is, again, just speculating, just sort of looking at what could be the possible reasons. But the way IT has been identified, the way in was it ConvoCon? Yeah, I forget which conference. A few months back when Sean Fraser came out, he was quite optimistic. And he did indicate that they will continue to invite more and more tech workers to come to Canada. Tech has still been identified as a priority occupation, as a priority industry. And I absolutely expect that the STEM category draws will continue, or rather will actually be conducted at least one definitely before the end of the year. That's what I anticipate. There is no way to absolutely know for certain what they will and what they will not do. Divya says 3 jobs are held at one company with different knock codes, however claiming points for just one. Reference letter has info of that job. Will that work or it needs editing? Well, first of all, I do not know what that letter includes, and does it need editing or not? I can't really tell you. But if you have held different positions with an employer, ideally, you should get the employer to indicate all those 3 different work periods and the 3 different positions and the 3 different job descriptions for each of them. If you don't wish to claim points for the other 2 and only 1 period of work, then have the employer specifically mention the period of work for that specific employment, the job description, and at the same point of time also mention the other two positions that you held. May not have to mention the job description, but as long as your documentation very clearly indicates your job description, the period of time you were working, the salary that you were paid, the hours, then you should be fine. After receiving ITA and mentioning child who is not in my custody but is with the father, they're asking for medicals and passport of a child. How can I proceed? Well, this is a mandatory requirement. If you have a child who is not in your custody, then the thing is that as part of the law, all your family members have to be assessed for for any kind of inadmissibility. In case of a child, the only inadmissibility that matters is the medical inadmissibility. Now, if you are unable to provide medicals for your child, then you would have to provide detailed documentation, detailed explanation as to why you can't provide medicals for your child. You would have to indicate the custody issue. You would have to indicate the effort that you have made requesting the father to have the child undergo the medicals. And then you have to then provide an affidavit and indicate that you will not sponsor that child for family sponsorship. Even then, it is IRCC's discretion to continue with your application or not, because your child is part of your family, your child is a family member, and the child has to be assessed for medicals. But as long as you have then provided ample information, documentation, and evidence to support that you are unable to get the medicals, and at the same point of time, you will not sponsor that child for permanent residence to Canada, then there is a very high, at least we have had several cases of similar situations where we were able to explain to IRCC and we were able to get our approval for our clients with the same explanation. But the requirement would be for you to be able to state that you would not sponsor the child for PR at a later date. Does the reference letter needs to be signed by HR or direct manager? Well, both options are available. The letter, your employment documentation, can be signed by HR, can be signed by your direct supervisor, can be signed by a direct manager, can be signed by the head of the department, can be signed by the CEO. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the person who is signing the document has the authority to sign the document, is in a position to give information about your job description. That is the most important factor. So in your case, it could be signed by HR or it could be signed by the manager. Both the options are fine. What is the difference between offer of employment and letter of employment and employment records in PR application? I have a LMIA job offer and I'm still in India. It's a good question, one that confuses a lot of people. So if you have said yes to arranged job offer in your express entry application, you will often see the document tabs to upload documents for offer of employment and letter of employment. And people are always confused, what is letter of employment and what is offer of employment? Actually, they're the same thing. It is just that at the time that the system was being designed and when they were making some changes, and then they had created these tabs for document to be uploaded for arranged job offer, they managed to create two different tabs. And when they realized that these two different tabs have been created, the effort and the cost that was involved in removing one of these tabs was so much more that it defeated the entire person. So they said, just let the tabs be. We will continue with the way things are, and there's no point of spending the money. So to explain that to you, in your offer of employment, you can add an employment offer letter that you have received from your employer, because as along with the LMIA, you would also receive a job offer letter. So add the offer letter in the offer of employment. For the letter of employment, you can add your copy of your LMIA. You can add your employment contract if you have one. And if you're currently working for that employer, then you can add your experience letter or your reference letter in that. For your employment record, it is always going to be your employment reference letter, your pay slips, pay stubs, T4s, notice of assessment, income tax returns, bank statements that show salary credit. So your employment record is all the records of your employment, which is valid for that particular period of work for which you're claiming points. I hope that helps and explains. Kubeir sir, I finally got my COPR details, updated on my tracker, also got a PPR, booked my appointment. I realized that patience is the key. Well said, my friend. Congratulations. I'm so glad to see this. I'm so glad to hear this. getting your PPR is such an ecstatic moment. I remember when I got mine, I completely went screaming and shouting, went up and down the house because I got it after a very long time. In my own application, I had 3 ADRs and 3 PFLs, procedural fairness letters. You can imagine the kind of anxiety and nervousness that I had in my application when we were going through that. But all's well that ends well, right? So congratulations, great job. I did work from home for one of the organizations situated in different state. So in the PR application under personal history for this work, should I need to mention my home address or company's address? If I give company's address, it contradicts with my address history. Now, for all your employment and for all your education, always and always your physical location is what needs to be mentioned in your address, and of course in that employment as well. For example, if I'm just going to sort of take an example. If you are working for Google in the US, but you were in India, are you going to say that you are working for Google in the US? I mean, in your location for work? You can't, right? Because you were in India. Same thing applies if you are in one country and working remotely or working from home for a company which is in a different state, in a different city. You will always mention wherever you are physically located, and that is how you would go about it. I hope that helps. Once ITA is received, can we deposit and increase funds in our savings account so as to meet the 6-month average funds requirement? Should we always maintain monthly requirement up to the ITA? Well, a lot of people confuse the 6-month requirement, ITA requirement, post-ITA requirement. Now, to clarify, the requirement is for you to provide proof of funds at the time you're submitting your PR application. That is the requirement. And after that, you must have the funds available throughout your application, even after your PR application has been approved and provided to you. And you have received your PR visa and now you're coming to Canada. Even at that point of time, you should have the required amount of funds. As far as the 6 months aging and increasing your funds, etc., is concerned, please bear in mind that the reason IRCC is asking you for 6 months statement and average monthly balance is because they want to ensure that the money belongs to you, that these funds are your funds, that you haven't borrowed this money. And if this money is borrowed, then that cannot be considered eligible for you to show that money as your proof of funds. So therefore, for your proof of funds, if the money has come into your account within the last 6 months, then you must explain the source of funds and provide evidence for the source of funds. And that is the only way to go about this. In my COPR, Toronto is my destination. However, I don't want to settle there. Do I have to land in Toronto? Also, if I land in Toronto, can I get a connecting flight to another province of my choice? Well, you can land anywhere in Canada, including Quebec, including Toronto, including Montreal, including Vancouver, Calgary, anywhere. No matter what it says on your COPR, it does not matter. You can land in any country, in any city, in any port of entry. It absolutely does not matter. Now, where does it differentiate? If you are a federal skilled worker or Canadian experience class, it does not matter what it says on your COPR and where you choose to live after you become a PR. Okay. What matters is if you're a provincial nominee. So, for example, you have a nomination from Saskatchewan and you land in Toronto. At the port of entry, you will be asked, where are you heading, right? What is your address? Now, you can give any address for receiving your PR card, for your friends, for your relatives, your own address if you have it. What the border officer can try to establish that do you still have the intention to reside in the province that has given you the nomination? That is the most important factor. If for whatever reason, for whatever you are saying, it is established that your intention is not to live in the province that nominated you, then it's a very, very big problem. But other than that, you can land anywhere, you can live anywhere, you're a federal skilled worker, you're a CEC, there is no problem, absolutely no issues. By all means, land anywhere and live anywhere and move anywhere, have a flight to another province, that absolutely works. As I explained, if you're a PNP, if you're landing in a different province, as long as you can establish that your intention is to reside in the province which has nominated you, you're fine. You could live for a few days in Toronto and then go to Saskatchewan, which is your nominated province. That is absolutely fine. There is no problem. Nobody is asking you to register and sign and report and say, have you landed here? Have you arrived here? Have you done this? Have you done this? No. So don't worry about it too much. In some cases, for example, in the Atlantic provinces, there may be a requirement that you at least let the province know that you have arrived. Okay. But other than that, you can land, live anywhere. That's not a problem. Okay. My AOR is in July. Almost all steps are completed. I have to travel outside of Canada in Jan. Can I travel after getting the portal request, or should I wait until I get my ECOPR? In my opinion, you should wait till you get your ECOPR. You are not a permanent resident until you receive your ECOPR. So the period of time between the portal request and the ECOPR is still a gray area. The law doesn't define that period of time. Because your ECOPR has not been issued, you are still a temporary resident. Now, if you are outside Canada and then your ECOPR is issued, then you are outside Canada and your PR has been issued on the basis of completing your virtual landing, for which you should have been in Canada in the first place, because that is what you have disclosed. So at this point of time, there is a big lag between the time of your portal request and your ECOPR being issued. It's almost stretching to 2 months. There is no indicated reason why it is happening. There is obviously a huge backlog there. But IRCC hasn't come out and said why the time gap between the two processes. And I can understand that it might create a lot of issues for a lot of people. But if it is a choice that is available to you, my recommendation is to stay put until you get your COPR. With the removal of 41 diplomats, what might be the processing time for LMIA? Diplomats do not process the LMIAs. LMIA is processed by ESTC. And that is done in Canada. And so 41 diplomats leaving India has no relevance or no consequence on the processing of your LMIA. My CRS is 148. I'm working in BC since 15 months in Tier 2. If I get provincial nomination and get 600, then what are the chances to get PR? Well, if you get 600 points, then your score becomes 748. And as long as IRCC continues to issue their regular express entry draws and PNP specific draws, with 600 points, you are bound to be receiving an ITA and then completing your application in express entry. A lot of people asking for timing, for any kind of time, processing times. Please refer to the IRCC website. And please see, based on the kind of application you're looking at and the country that it is possibly being processed in. Is Public Provident Fund valid for Saskatchewan proof of funds? I think yes. I don't remember on top of my head. You can always check Saskatchewan's website. They do have a list of all the documentation that they accept for proof of funds. If in doubt, you can always write to them and check with them as well. Harish, thank you for the super chat. I used LMIA and I got 1 year work permit, but my LMIA is still valid. Can I apply for renewal of work permit using the same LMIA? Yes, you can. If your LMIA is still valid, you can apply for extension using the same LMIA. My wife has, honestly, I don't understand what PKD means. And we applied for PR through PNP. My side of file and everything of HR got approved except medicals, and on GCMS we saw M5 and now in HMIF Niagara. Okay, so you're probably referring to some sort of a health condition. Now, if there is an M5 code mentioned, then it could possibly means that your wife may be in the excessive demand threshold category. At some point of time, if the medical inadmissibility is still being reviewed or assessed, you may receive a procedural fairness letter depending on what is the final assessment and the condition that has been indicated. Based on that procedural fairness letter, you would have to then provide mitigation plan as to how do you plan to handle this health condition without it impacting the excessive demand threshold. Once you're able to satisfy the visa officer with that, you would get your application processed further. Okay, but yes, please do consult with the with a professional when you do get any PFL, because that's not an easy one to handle without understanding the complexities involved. Najmuddin, thank you for the super chat. Unfortunately, there's no question there. I have applied under the Quebec Skilled Worker Program. I have been asked to submit birth certificate, but my place of birth is different in my birth certificate and passport. Should I need to correct my passport, or will a letter of explanation work? I do not practice Quebec immigration. I'm not licensed to practice in Quebec, so my knowledge with Quebec programs is extremely, extremely limited. I am unable to answer this question with absolute certainty. My suggestion would be to provide a birth certificate with a detailed explanation. And from there on, if you are still asked to change the place of birth in your passport, that you can do that. Meanwhile, if you want to simultaneously do it anyways, you can. But if your birth certificate is requested for, then you should provide it, and you can provide an additional information or letter of explanation as to why is there a change between, or otherwise there a difference between your place of birth and on your passport and your birth certificate. Hopping on to the questions. Oh, it's all blank. We have, if I have LMIA job offer and letter of support from Alberta, then is there a need to show bank statement as proof of fund for PR? If you have an LMIA job offer, then there is no requirement for you to provide proof of funds. Only two conditions when you don't need proof of funds is one, that if you have a valid arranged job offer, which you have because you have an LMIA. And second condition is if you are under the Canadian experience class, then you don't need proof of funds. So in your case, you satisfy the first condition, which is that you have an arranged job offer. Therefore, you do not need proof of funds. I have received LMIA a couple of months ago, waiting for work permit approval. Can I proceed with 2122 for EE profile? Will there be any knock issues? Not sure why ESDC is still using old knock codes. ESDC is still using old knock codes depending on the application that was made for that particular knock. And in most LMIA approvals, you will see the old and the new knock that has been made for that particular period. Now, if you want to proceed with 21222, depending on the job description and depending on which part of 2171 and 21222 the matches, you may be able to use it. But at the end of the day, you have to still be able to prove that the knock code is same or similar. Okay, same questions coming through. All right. My knock is in transport category. I work in merchant navy as deck officer on rotational basis, 6 months on off, which is statutory nature of work over the world. Can I claim full-time work experience under federal skilled worker, not paid while on vacation, but still employed? Unfortunately not. As much as I understand what is the nature of the work that you do, category defines the different occupations that are included in that business. However, bigger than that or superseding that is the law, which is Immigration Refugee Protection Act and Immigration Refugee Protection Regulation, which defines what are the criteria on which the entire program of permanent residence is based, including express entry and including federal skilled worker. Federal skilled worker program is absolutely clear. Your work experience has to be for 1 year continuous, 12 months continuous within the last 10 years. You should have been paid for the entire period of 12 months unless you can obtain valid documentations to establish that you were working and you were paid for 12 months. It is not considered as eligible period of work. I absolutely am with you, and I understand how the position is and how that can be detrimental. But the very fact that your period of vacation is not paid makes it ineligible for you to claim anything with that. So, yeah. We did this one. Can you please explain how the Alberta Advantage program works? They have something called company transfer. My son works in a company in Toronto. He can get a transfer to their Calgary branch. I don't know what you mean by company transfer. If you're referring to the intra-company transfer, then if your son is able to get a job offer from the employer or his company in Calgary, where it states that they want to hire him for the Calgary branch, then if he is in the tech field, so that is what you're referring to is the Alberta Tech Accelerated Tech Pathway. You can Google for it. You can check Alberta's website as well. Alberta Accelerated Tech Pathway. That is what you are looking at. And in that program, you will first of all, you need to have work experience in the eligible occupations. The employer has to have NAICS code, which is listed in that list. It is usually in the tech field. And you will then be able to create your expression of interest. Once you create your expression of interest, and if your score is 300 plus, you would get invited. Once you get invited, you complete your application, provide the employment documents, including your work experience, as well as the job offer that you have. And Alberta is pretty fast in that. They do process that application very quick. I mean, we've had success in as less as than a week for the nomination to be processed by them. So they're pretty fast with that one. Okay. Should we take reference letters from employers in advance and keep, or are we needed to request for them only after receiving ITA? No, there is no condition to request for letters only after ITA. You can have them whenever you want, as long as your employment letters indicate the period of work for which you are claiming points, and you can prove also by your pay slips and pay stubs. It doesn't matter when the document has been dated. Yeah, you can absolutely get it in advance and keep them handy, just so that you can submit your application fast once you get your ITA. I have applied for non-EE in September, but I haven't got a biometric request. Is this normal? It is absolutely normal, because a non-express entry application, the AOR, which is acknowledgement of receipt, and the file number generation takes anywhere between 8 to 10 months. Only after that will you get the biometric request. So yeah, quite normal. My application got rejected in NOC 92. So what should I do? I already sent for reconsideration, but the officer is not considered. I can't tell you, because you're not saying anything as to why was it refused, why was it rejected, where did you go wrong. And even after you have applied for reconsideration, again, the only time you can apply for reconsideration for a PR application is when you are certain that the the visa officer has made an error in fact or in application of the law, in fact or law. If the officer has not made any mistake in the fact and law, and if it was your mistake and you did not provide the required documentation, then unfortunately there is nothing much you can do with the rejection. You will simply have to reapply. I live in Alberta and I received a PNP ITA for Ontario. How much time do I have after receiving my PR card to move to Ontario? There is no such thing as a stated time as to when you have to move to Ontario. The point is that you have indicated that in your application for nomination that your intention is to reside in Ontario. Because there is no time mentioned, you can move at any point of time whenever you wish to. Please do so at least within the first 5 years, because at any point of time when you will make an application for citizenship and you will make an application for extension of your PR card, you would have to establish your proof of address and you would have to indicate your addresses. And if for whatever reason it is identified that you did not go through with your intention to reside in the province that was indicated, on any kind of audit, any kind of check, if that is identified and that is understood and established, then you get into trouble for that. So therefore, while there is no specific time that has been mentioned that after getting PR, within this many days you must move, there is no such thing like that. You should try and move at your earliest convenience. I think we already answered that question. My CRS is 480 maxed. Either go for LMIA or go back to India and get a 1 year full-time experience and file my PR, which is a better option. If you can get an LMIA, you have an employer who is willing to give you an LMIA, definitely go for LMIA. If you cannot find an employer who can give you the LMIA, then you go back and get your full-time work experience in, so that you can still be able to submit your PR application. If you are choosing the second option, which is to go back to your home country and get 1 year of full-time work experience, you should identify an occupation which is considered as a priority occupation, whether it is tech, healthcare, trades, or whatever that might be, and get your work experience in that field, so that after completing 6 months itself, you will become eligible in the category-based draws. And after getting 1 year of work experience, not only will your express entry CRS score go up, you would also remain eligible in category-based draws. So it will always be a, you're killing two birds with one stone, right? So do that if you can. I applied for PR on August 2023 under PNP STEM category. When can I expect COPR? It's been 3 months. What are the steps after COPR? My wife is in India. I am in Canada. There are a lot of questions there, Najmuddin. The regular standard processing time for an application in express entry is roughly 6 months. Current processing time is averaging between 5 to 7 months, depends on your background, your profile, your application. Because you are inside Canada, you would be processed with your COPR through virtual landing. You will get an email which will ask you if you are currently in Canada. If you say yes, then they will send you the portal request. You will complete the information and upload your photograph on the portal. And after that, you will receive your eCOPR. Your spouse who is outside Canada, because your spouse is not, I was outside Canada and not inside Canada, then your spouse will receive a passport request. And using that passport request, your spouse can submit the passport to the nearest VFS or Canadian Embassy, where the visa will be stamped, COPR will be issued, and your spouse can enter Canada within the valid period indicated on the visa and then become permanent resident. Okay, we're going to take last few questions before I scoot off. Plenty of questions there. I wish I could answer all of them, but by all means, please do comment in the video after the video is over, and I will come back and answer as many questions as I can. Let's see. PGWP extension possibility for 24 and 25. I mean, as much as a lot of people want that to happen, expect that to happen, in my opinion, absolutely opinion, I would not really bet my money on either 24 or 25. Certainly not 25, definitely not 25. Even on 24, I have very little hope that the extension for postgraduates will happen. Of course, it can happen. I'm not saying it is not happening. I'm not making that statement. I'm saying, given the circumstances, given the current atmosphere around the whole housing crisis, and how the imbalance between the temporary residents and PR permanent residents quotas are growing, the fact that COVID-19, the situation and the circumstances around that does not exist, the fact that there isn't too much of movement or any members of parliament who are coming out and trying to advocate for the extension of postgraduate work permit for 2024. Therefore, with all these different factors in mind, in my opinion, I have little expectation that the postgraduate work permits will be extended. Of course, as I said, it can always happen. It all depends on how the government is impressed upon to sort of make this kind of a change. They've done it in the past. They've done it twice or thrice before, and definitely can do it again. But the current circumstances and atmosphere within the current political situation as well are not in the favor of another extension at this point of time. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. Okay, what have we got here? Can I include my work experience before my graduation as SWO for MPNP, like I got my degree and transcripts after 3 months? You are talking about skilled worker overseas. So yes, of course you can, as long as you have the work experience and documentation to provide for it, you should be able to do it. I applied for Alberta Tech Pathway and received the notification of interest. Now I am wondering to remove all my Indian and foreign experience apart from the tech job that I did in Alberta. So do I need to apply again? No, you don't need to apply again. As long as you still have enough work experience, as long as you still have enough points, you should be able to proceed. The recommendation is to provide the documentation. The recommendation is not to remove it. The recommendation is to mention it. You may not have to provide work experience documents for all of it. Provide for whatever you can. And for any period of work you cannot provide documentation, you can provide an explanation. But there is nowhere to remove it from. There is nothing to remove it. Alberta application is pretty simple. It asks you to disclose your work experience, and you should. So there is nothing to remove it from. Yes, from your express entry application, if you wish to, after receiving the nomination, you can remove it from your work history and mention it in your personal history. As long as your eligibility is not impacted, the 67 points for federal skilled worker. And as long as your CRS score doesn't, with 600 points, your CRS score will not be impacted, but your eligibility can certainly be impacted. So as long as you can make sure about that, you should be fine. Okay, last question before I will leave for today, and let's see this one. I have been working as a freelance music producer while being here in India. I have filed my ITR. Every payment comes from PayPal and have a bank statement. Will it be possible to show work experience proof? Yes, of course, it will be. We have done so many such cases. We did one who was a graphic designer on WeWork. There was another one who was in an IT, I think he was providing some sort of a consulting services on Fiverr, and we've been successful. So the idea is for you to be able to obtain letters from your different clients, which indicate the period of work, which indicate your job description, and that you are paid. In addition to that, then you have to provide copies of invoices. You have to provide payment proof to show that you are paid for all that period of time. But it's absolutely possible. There is no issue with that. You can most certainly go for it. If you wish to book an appointment one-on-one, then this is the link. We can discuss your background, your questions, your queries, your concerns more in detail and understand what are the better options for that. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. We would like to see the numbers go up there as well. And please do follow us on Instagram. If you have any commercial inquiries, if you want to sign up for our services, then please, that is the email. By all means, do drop an email, and we will be more than happy to help you with that. Thank you so much for joining in. It has been a pleasure again, as usual, and we will see you again next week.